Hewlett-Packard CEO, presidential candidate from Virginia, Carly Fiorina, her third appearance right here on the John Fredericks Show. Miss Fiorina, great to have you with us.
Good morning, John. How are you? And Carly is just fine,
Well, Carly, you're on a roll. You've been making some waves. I think you've got some momentum, and you got a chance to get in these debates. Now, look, you had a speech Saturday in Las Vegas, which I want to just mention to my audience, which I thought was pretty interesting. I got to see the full clip of it. And one thing you said in there that really struck it, I want to go straight to politics, then we'll get to some of the issues. You said to your audience there, you said, go ahead, admit it. You really want to see me debate Hillary Clinton in the general election, don't you? My answer is yes. How do you get there?
Well, and of course everyone applauded because people do. People know this is a fight, and I think people are beginning to understand that I'm a fighter for the things that we need to do to lead the resurgence of a great nation. So honestly, John, what I do is continue to do what I'm doing. That is, reach as many people as I can, and that's why I appreciate so much the opportunity to speak with your listeners. When I started this campaign on May 4th, the majority of Americans had never heard my name. And so, really, I have been introducing myself to the American people. And the more I think people get to know me, the better chance I have. But this is intended to be a citizen government. And the reason I think my candidacy has momentum is because all of the polling data says that the majority of Americans, 80% actually in the latest polls, are tired of the professional political class. They think that professional politicians are more concerned with the preservation of their own power, title, and position than getting the work done. We have festering problems in this country that we can't completely lay at the feet of Democrats. Some of these problems, like an insecure border or 70,000-page tax code or sanctuary cities or the shame of the Veterans Administration, these have been around for decades, not years.
Look, there's no question. Many of us believe, like me, politicians got us in this mess. I don't see how they're going to get us out, especially when you look at the results after the watershed change in the midterms. Nothing really is different. I think that's frustrating, Carly, a lot of people. I want to get to the Planned Parenthood videotape. You released a pretty strong statement on it the other day. Everybody knows you're pro-life. Do you think any changes should be made in that organization?
Well, yes. And, I think people who are pro-choice look at this video and say, something is desperately wrong here. Something is desperately wrong when the left continues to say it's not a life until it leaves the hospital and yet goes to great lengths to preserve the organs of this non-life. I mean, it is horrific. And so I think there are two things that need to happen. Planned Parenthood needs to be defunded. It is beyond shameful that taxpayer dollars are being used to harvest organs of unborn children. And beyond that, I think there is as you know, a Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act sitting on the floor of the Senate right now. That bill needs to be passed to prevent late-term abortions.
Preventing late term, obviously one big issue, but I just want to get to the fetuses. I mean, really, at the end of the day, there's two options. Either you put them in an incinerator or you use them for research. No matter how you stand on the issue, I mean, aren't those really the only two options?
Well, no, there's a third option, and that is to be honest with the women who are facing a terrible choice. These women are, according to the Democrats, they shouldn't be able to see an ultrasound that shows them the life within them, and yet Planned Parenthood is using ultrasounds to determine where, and I'm using their words, crush the unborn child. Think about that. Mm-hmm. So women ought to have access to options as well. So why wouldn't there be, for example, if you're going to pay for Planned Parenthood with taxpayer dollars, why wouldn't you spend an equal amount of taxpayer dollars on pregnancy centers so that women can understand what their options are? But we don't do that. Why don't you allow women to see an ultrasound? I think what this videotape does is it lays bare the charade. Planned Parenthood continues to talk about the fact that they're for women's health. Nothing could be further from the truth. They're not for women's health, nor are they for educating women about what is really going on, giving them the tools and the access to all the technology that would help them make a choice, and informing them of other options that are available to them?
We're with presidential candidate from Virginia, Carly Fiorina. Carly, let's get to this Iranian deal. One thing really troubling people now, beyond the deal, is that this administration basically let the UN Security Council weigh in on it, make their decision before our Congress has had a chance to look at it. Doesn't this go right in the eye of our sovereignty?
Of course, absolutely. And here's the terrible truth about this deal. Even if Congress stops it, and I hope they do because it's a powerful message, even if Congress stops it, even if the UN Security Council hadn't weighed in, Russia, China, and the European Union have moved on. They've signed this deal. And in particular, Russia and China have always had a vested interest in opening Iran's economy. They have never been negotiating on our side of the table.
Right.
And so they're moving on. Money's going to start to flow almost immediately. Sanctions can't be snapped back, which is why I have said on day one in the Oval Office, I would make a phone call, first to Bibi Netanyahu to reassure him, but second to the Supreme Leader of Iran to say, I don't care what the deal is, new deal. We are going to make it as hard as possible for you to move money around the global financial system by cutting off your access to global payment systems. We can do that. We don't need the UN's permission. We don't need China and Russia to agree. We don't need the EU to say it's okay. We need to stop this deal, and unfortunately, too many people in the world are already moving on and licking their chops about the prospects for an open Iranian economy. It's a bad deal, and the next president has to do something, and I will.
So what you're saying that if you were elected president on day one, basically you would contact the Iranians and say you're going to unravel the deal, which we all know at the end of the day there's no way it'll get overridden if Obama vetoes it. They're not going to get 2/3 and two houses, right?
Well, yes, absolutely. And truthfully, I can't undo the deal that China and Russia have done. They will be in that economy opening it. But what I can do, what the United States can do, is stop the money flow. And it is the money flow that's so damaging and dangerous because they will use it to weaponize. They will use it to fund their proxies, who will continue to sow conflict in the region. And they will use that money to continue their nuclear program, I believe, because there's nothing really in this inspections agreement that will prevent them from doing so.
We're with presidential candidate from Virginia, Carly Fiorina, Republican. Carly, let's get to Cuba. We normalized relations. Secretary of State John Kerry says he's going there in August. They just put their flag up in their new diplomatic center in Washington, D.C. Right thing, wrong thing?
Wrong thing. Wrong thing for many reasons. But let's just start with the fact that we have rewarded bad behavior. Cuba has engaged in bad behavior. They have not changed their behavior one bit. In fact, there is evidence that their repression has gotten worse, and yet we have rewarded them by normalizing relations, by giving them an embassy, by sending them a Secretary of State. The truth about this administration's foreign policy, and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is equally culpable with the president, is we continue to reward bad behavior. So we have rewarded the bad behavior of Bashar al-Assad. We have rewarded the bad behavior of Iran. We have rewarded the bad behavior of Russia. We have rewarded the bad behavior of China in the South China Sea by doing nothing, and we are rewarding the bad behavior of Cuba. So what happens when you continue to reward bad behavior? You get more of it. And that's what we're going to continue to see in this administration, more bad behavior. The world is a dangerous place when the United States of America will not stand up and push back against bad behavior, stand with our allies, and confront our adversaries.
Carly, if you were president, what would be your message to Russian President Putin as far as Ukraine is concerned? Would you have a different policy than the one that we have now, which nobody can really figure out what it is anyway?
Yes, absolutely. I wouldn't talk to Putin, actually. I've met him. I've had a rather long meeting with him. I wouldn't talk to him. I wouldn't call him, because the truth is we've talked too much to him. I would immediately do three things. Start rebuilding the Sixth Fleet in a very visible manner. Conduct aggressive military exercises in the Baltic states. I would begin to move troops in and out of Germany. Those would be very powerful symbols. A week ago, John, I would have told you that I would arm the Ukrainians. But we now know that the Ukrainians, because we have not acted, the Ukrainians have turned to the Chechens for support. The Chechens are in alliance with ISIS. This is a demonstration of the fact that when there is no action, a dangerous situation becomes more dangerous. Mm-hmm. But if those three things are done, and I would do them, Putin would get the message that, I guess the United States of America is willing to confront me again. Longer term, by the way, we have to be the global energy powerhouse of the 21st century, because Putin gets a lot of his power from energy, and we could diminish that power.
So you've got the Ukrainians now, you're saying, turning to what is a terrorist organization who backs ISIS simply because we didn't do anything and they had no option, right?
That is correct. That is absolutely correct. I mean, we talked and talked and talked, but we did nothing. Mm-hmm. And so the message is very clear to Putin, keep going, and the message is equally clear to the Ukrainians. We cannot count on the United States of America.
What would your message be to President Assad in Syria?
Well, the Syrian situation has gotten extremely complex, once again, because we did not act. And so, honestly, there is no easy solution in Syria now. The moderate rebel groups that we once could have armed are, in many ways, no more. The big battle going on in Syria now is between the Syrian regime and ISIS, two really bad choices. What I would do is hold a Camp David summit immediately with our Arab allies, potentially involve the Turks as well. The first conversation with our Arab allies would be, what do you need from us to defeat ISIS? They know this is their fight. They've asked us four very specific things. The Egyptians, the Kuwaitis, the Jordanians, the Kurds, the Saudis, every single one of these nations are fighting ISIS as we speak on the ground. And they need support from us, bombs and materiel, intelligence, special ops. They've asked for all these things. We've provided nothing. However, at the same time, I would speak to them about what is the right answer now in Syria. This is a tremendously complicated situation. I would turn to our military commanders as well and ask them for options. Many of those options have been provided, we know, to the administration, and none of those options have been acted upon. But there's not an easy answer right now in Syria, to be very honest.
And I appreciate that honesty and that candor. Carly Fiorina, let's get to the domestic front. A horrific terrorist attack now. 5 of our soldiers dead. Now we find out they were not armed. Now we got the DOD saying, well, maybe what they need to do is just go in civilian clothes. What say you?
For heaven's sakes, let us repeal the law that prevents our military from defending themselves. It is shameful that this coward terrorist drives by in a car, and we have Marines who are Purple Heart winners, veterans. They have been in firefights in terrible places in the world, and they cannot defend themselves. For heaven's sakes, let us allow them to defend themselves, whether they are in recruiting centers or on the base or with their families. We've known for some time that ISIS was targeting military installations, military members, and their families. ISIS declared this on their websites. This shouldn't have been a secret, and as usual, we have a government that is now prepared to do too little too late. This is why people lose faith, because they say, you know what, everybody gives speeches after the fact. We give speeches after the fact. We give speeches after we learned 250-plus thousand veterans died without being given access to proper care, despite the ongoing scandals of the Veterans Administration. The answers here are usually pretty obvious, but it takes leadership and political will to act before it's too late, or to do the right thing when the right thing is blindingly obvious. Okay,
we are out of time. We want to thank presidential candidate from Virginia, Carly Fiorina, for being with us. For more information, go to carlyforpresident.com, carlyforpresident.com. Hey, we really appreciate your being on, and this in-depth dialogue that we had, Ms. Fiorina. Thank you so much.
John, it's my great pleasure. Thank you for having me.